Like right here. I never did when I forget what squeeze. Just touch.
Sweet. Thank you.
And then
All right, good morning.
It's like laying in this and then bounce around it because the cut's right here.
We're going to look at King Rehoboam today. One of the, just really an outstanding kind of guy, you know, sort of, maybe some days, on his good days. We've got we've got a passage from Second Chronicles and kind of the mirror passage at First Kings. I want to go ahead and read through them both, and then we'll get into some introductory stuff, looking back at Solomon just for a few minutes, and then we'll dive into these things that Rehoboam is up to. So I'm going to read Second Chronicles chapter 11. Verse 18, and then through chapter 12, verse 16. So it's a bit of text, so just bear with me here. Second Chronicles 11:18. Rehoboam married Mahalath, who was the daughter of David's son Jeremoth, and of Abihail, the daughter of Jesse's son Eliab. She bore him sons, Jeush, Shemariah, and Zaham. Then he married Maacah, daughter of Absalom, who bore him Abijah, Attai, Ziza, and Shelemith. Rehoboam loved Maacah, daughter of Absalom, more than any of his other wives and concubines. Where have we heard that before? In all, he had 18 wives and 60 concubines, 28 sons, and 60 daughters. Rehoboam appointed Abijah, son of Maacah, to be the chief prince among his brothers, in order to make him king. He acted wisely, dispersing some of his own sons throughout the districts of Judah and Benjamin and to all the fortified cities. He gave them abundant provisions and took many wives for them. Chapter 12. After Rehoboam's position as king was established and he had become strong, he and all Israel with him abandoned the law of the Lord. Because they had been unfaithful to the Lord, Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem in the 5th year of King Rehoboam. With 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horsemen and the innumerable troops of Libyans, Sukites, and Cushites that came with him from Egypt, he captured the fortified cities of Judah and came as far as Jerusalem. Then the prophet Shemaiah came to Rehoboam and to the leaders of Judah who had assembled in Jerusalem for fear of Shishak. And he said to them, "This is what the Lord says. You have abandoned me, therefore I now abandon you to Shishak." The leaders of Israel and the king humbled themselves and said, "The Lord is just." When the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, this word of the Lord came to Shemaiah. "Since they have humbled themselves, I will not destroy them, but will soon give them deliverance. My wrath will not be poured out on Jerusalem through Shishak. They will, however, become subject to him so that they may learn the difference between serving me and serving the kings of other lands." When Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem, he carried off the treasures of the temple of the Lord and the treasures of the royal palace. He took everything, including the gold shields Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made bronze shields to replace them, assigned these to the commanders of the guard on duty at the entrance to the royal palace. Whenever the king went to the Lord's temple, the guards went with him, bearing the shields, and afterward they returned them to the guard room. Because Rehoboam humbled himself, the Lord's anger turned from him, and he was not totally destroyed. Indeed, there was some good in Judah. King Rehoboam established himself firmly in Jerusalem and continued as king. He was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel in which to put his name. His mother's name was Naamah. She was an Ammonite. He did evil because he had not set his heart on seeking the Lord. As for the events of Rehoboam's reign, from beginning to end, are they not written in the records of Shemaiah the prophet and of Iddo the seer that deal with genealogies? We don't know anything about either of those records. There was continual warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Rehoboam rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, and Abijah his son succeeded him as king. All right, there's a lot there. And then the 1 Kings verse 14, or yeah, no, I'm sorry, 1 Kings chapter 14, verses 21 through 31 is kind of the short version of what we just read. I'll go through that real quickly here. 1 Kings 14:21. Rehoboam, son of Solomon, was king in Judah. He was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel in which to put his name. His mother's name was Naamah. She was an Ammonite. Judah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. By the sins they committed, they stirred up his jealous anger more than their fathers had done. They also set up for themselves high places, sacred stones, and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. There were even male shrine prostitutes in the land. The people engaged in all the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem. He carried off the treasures of the temple of the Lord and the treasures of the royal palace. He took everything, including all the gold shields Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made bronze shields to replace them and assigned these to the commanders of the guard on duty at the entrance to the royal palace. Whenever the king went to the Lord's temple, the guards bore the shields, and afterward they returned them to the guard room. As for the other events of Rehoboam's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? There was continual warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and Rehoboam rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David. His mother's name was Naamah. She was an Ammonite, and Abijah, his son, succeeded him as king. So, it seems like there's an odd fixation in both those accounts of these golden shields, to me, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But it's also one other interesting thing, especially in the passage from 1 Kings we just read. They tell us 2 times in the space of 10 verses that his mother was an Ammonite. So maybe that's significant. So we'll keep that in mind as well. But first, let's go back. Rehoboam is Solomon's son, and Solomon has passed away, and Rehoboam is now king. So we look at the book of Ecclesiastes in chapter 2, verses 18 through 19. And this is what Solomon said: "Thus I hated all the fruit of my labor, for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor, for which I have labored by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity." So that's not really a good sign, I guess, if Solomon's saying, "Well, I'm not sure about who I'm leaving this to." So if you'll remember from last week, Rehoboam is the guy, as Kevin taught us last week, in chapter 12 in 1 Kings. He's the guy who consulted with the old wise men that Solomon had and ignored their advice about how to treat the people of Israel. So he went and talked to all his peers, his gang, and they all backed him up. Said, "Well, I'm going to make things even tougher. I'm going to tax you more. I'm going to replace the whips with scorpions, and so on and so forth." So he just alienates everybody, and he says, "In fact, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist." So we've got a painting this week on your hand, and we'll get to that right away.
His little finger.
This is a painting by Hans Holbein the Younger, who was painting. He was a German painter in the early 1500s. Was his kind of the prime of his career. It's kind of a crappy quality, because this is what remains of the city council murals from Basel, Switzerland. They were painted on plaster, which is kind of hard to take care of. But this is a remnant that's left from Holbein was hired by the city council in Basel to paint murals in their meeting rooms. And the thought is, well, Holbein was kind of reminding the people governing the canton of Basel in Switzerland, say, remember what happened to Rehoboam. Don't be like Rehoboam. And then there's another painting of his down at the bottom. I just put, just because it's an actual painting. It's well preserved. That's his portrait of Thomas More, who was executed by Henry VIII of England because Thomas More wouldn't support Henry VIII's being in charge of the Church of England. So, that's a whole nother fascinating story. But Hans Holbein the Younger, we've actually looked at one of his pieces before. So I like his stuff. It's pretty good. So that's his portrayal of Rehoboam showing off his little finger to the crowd. What's left of the murals that he had planned. Well, yeah, it is, I guess.
Who knows what that meant?
Exactly.
There is some interesting interpretations of what he actually meant to say by that. We won't go into that. So Solomon. Again, back to Solomon. What did he do at the start of his reign? What did he? It's interesting. Solomon, in 1 Kings chapter 3, what did he do? Do we remember? What did he do? Did he asked for wisdom, right? Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, yet I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. Your servant is in the midst of your people, which you have chosen, a great people who are too many to be numbered or counted. So give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, to discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours? So Solomon, again, for all the things that happen later, is this not how you start some kind of leadership, anything you start, really? Is this not how you kick it off? You ask for wisdom, you ask for guidance. We have no indication, though, that Rehoboam, had any kind of sense of that at all. He starts off by alienating everybody in Israel by saying, "I want to make life even harder for you," and of course that leads to the start of the divided kingdom. So it's interesting that
He asked the wrong people. He asked his friends and not God.
he asked the yes man, and he didn't ask, listen to the advisors, and he didn't ask God. Right, exactly. So he just asked people who were going to tell him what he wanted to hear, I think. So he marries Mahalath, who is the daughter of David's son Jeremoth and of Abihail, the daughter of Jesse's sons Eliab. I kind of tried to draw up a family chart of all these people he's marrying. It's a little complicated because there's all these half brothers and half sisters, and it's basically Mahalath was his cousin, the best I can figure. So she has 3 sons with him, and then he marries Maacah, daughter of Absalom, who is one of David's sons. So, but Maacah is another one of his cousins, I think, or a half cousin, or a step cousin, or something like that.
All in the family.
It was all in the
That's
family,
what they did.
which is just the
That's what
way,
they all did.
which was not uncommon, I don't think, that it's done that way. But then it says Rehoboam loved Maacah, daughter of Absalom, more than any of his other wives and concubines. So he appointed Abijah, son of Maacah, to be the chief prince among his brothers and presumably the heir to the throne. But there are at least 3 sons who were born before Abijah. So is there any connection between that and it says he disperses some of the sons throughout the district of Judah and Benjamin? Won't there be a little rivalry going that he's trying to head off? Say, well, these 3 older sons, they probably think, well, maybe why weren't we appointed? One of us appointed to be the heir apparent. So maybe Rehoboam says, well, maybe I'll just get them out of town, and then they're out of the way. That's my cynical view on it, that he's trying to avoid any kind of conflict with these older sons. But he gives them lots of wives, so I guess things are okay.
Worked out well for his dad.
Yeah, you know, and that's another thing. You know, here your father is the wisest man who ever lived. You would, and this actually kind of gives me hope because, you know, my dad is a very smart guy. He was a great guy. I love my father very much, but nobody ever said he's the wisest man who ever lived. So that gives me an excuse for some of the stupid things I've done in my life, right? Yeah, if I'd even just listened to my father, let alone the wisest man who ever lived. Anyway, Rehoboam apparently did not, you know, there's some things he didn't learn as well as he should have. So anyway, so he disperses the opposition, I think. The writer of Chronicles says he acted wisely in doing that. Maybe so. Mark, you have a comment? You look like you were saying something. So chapter 12, well, let me see, make sure I'm not missing something here.
Hey, John,
Yes.
just a side note. Do we know who Rehoboam's mom was? Because there were like all those wives and concubines. We're assuming he was like one of the oldest sons, right?
I don't remember that I've ever run across
Okay.
anybody who knows. If somebody knows,
Rehoboam's mother.
who was
Mother.
Rehoboam's
I
mother?
think it was just written in, what you just read in Second Chronicles. I thought I
Was
saw that.
Like I was trying to.
You didn't see it?
Name a.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, duh.
He mentioned.
They told
Yeah,
us, they told us twice in First Kings.
Well, no,
That's
I
right.
thought that was.
Yeah,
Because
I thought I remember
that,
saw
I
it.
thought that was his son's mother that they were talking about. Okay.
No, that's right, I'm sorry.
She's an Ammonite.
His mother was an
Oh, I thought
Ammonite.
that was his. Okay.
No,
I
sorry,
thought that
I-
was the woman that his son married. Never
No.
mind. I'm good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for setting me straight. I just said that 5 minutes ago and I forgot it.
Yeah, I was just on the wrong generation.
We're talking about Jeroboam, right?
What?
Rehoboam,
Rehoboam.
Right.
Next week is Jeroboam.
right, okay.
We'll get confused all over again. Heather?
I find it interesting, the Ecclesiastes passage you brought in. You
Uh-huh.
know, I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. When Solomon said that, who knows if they're wise or foolish? It just seems like Solomon, it just shows the selfishness of his heart. And I think about like all the confusion in these families, even David and Solomon, the sons kind of vying for all the kids vying for attention of their father.
Yeah.
You know, the fallout of that, the pain of that. And this, you know, kind of just shows that it doesn't look like he has a succession plan, or he really is really teaching. He probably wasn't even that involved in teaching his kids that much. It's from kind of what we've read. I just find it kind of sad. There were I think there was probably a lot of pain, a lot of struggle in the families of, you know, David, Solomon,
Mhm.
and Rehoboam. You know, we kind of see that he messed up his life kind of too, in essence. So just, it's kind of sad when you look at the practicalities of what the pain in families, the neglect, Solomon may have been wise, but I don't know, you know, not necessarily from the perspective of being a good father
Mhm.
of all of those kids.
Good. So, you know, whether it's good idea, bad idea, he sends his sons out. He's established as the king. And then first verse of chapter 12. After Rehoboam's position as king was established and he had become strong, what happens? He and all Israel with him abandoned the law of the Lord. So thanks, Lord, I got what I wanted. I don't need you anymore. You know, does that resonate with anybody or everybody? abandon the law of the Lord. Okay, and then at least the NIV says, because they had been unfaithful to the Lord, Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem. So it seems like it's a punishment, right? You've abandoned me, so Shishak is free to come in and he's going to attack you. But then, yeah, so Rehoboam he's kind of a mixed bag. It does say, where is it? There was some, in verse 12, it says, there was some good in Judah. So it's not like he's totally gone. He's totally a lost cause. The Shishak attacks, and then Shemaiah, the prophet Shemaiah comes and says, well, God says, well, you abandoned me, so I've abandoned you. But then the leadership kind of realize, well, we need to do something. And again, to their credit, they humble themselves, and God says, well, okay, since you have humbled yourselves, you've recognized your mistake, I'm going to let you be punished, I think, essentially, but not totally wiped out or totally conquered. And then he got through Shemaiah, God says an interesting thing in verse 8. He says, they will become subject to him so that they may learn the difference between serving me and serving the kings of other lands. So maybe, do we take this? I mean, they are literally serving other people because they did not, they didn't follow the law of the Lord as well as they should have. And does that happen to us if we aren't serving the Lord as we should? Maybe we aren't literally serving a master, but do we not find ourselves serving other things? I mean, James talked about what? Idols and other gods, and is it not kind of the same thing that if you don't follow me, you're going to, you got to serve somebody, as Bob Dylan says. So it is not kind of the same thing that they are going to learn, and they're going to be learning the lesson for a long time about serving somebody besides God. Kevin?
Interesting in the 2 Chronicles 12 version of this, when Shishak from Egypt, first of all, this is an interesting guy because we talked about the adversaries of Solomon, that because he had sinned against God, God said, I'm going to tear the kingdom again away from you. And you all of a sudden have these adversaries that have not been a part of disrupting any kind of trade, or they haven't gone to war against these people. But all of a sudden, because Solomon has sinned, God allows this to happen. And this guy who's in charge of Egypt, Shishak, is kind of harboring at least two of them. Hadad, the Edomite, we talked about, who as a young boy had gone to Egypt, and his family becomes royalty because he marries the sister-in-law of Shishak.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's in Edom and he's causing Solomon problems. And then you have Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who fled to Shishak as well.
Right.
And so you have kind of this undercurrent of Shishak is not in favor of Solomon and his family. Then all of a sudden they attack, and it says here, it gives the numbers, 1,200 chariots, 60,000 horsemen, and innumerable troops of Libyans and Sukkites and Cushites that came with him from Egypt. So not only is he attacking with his army, he's got surrounding countries' armies attacking Judah and Jerusalem. And so it's kind of interesting because when they are right with God in the life of Solomon, none of this stuff happens. When they go wrong, God allows them to start to have these adversaries, and then all of a sudden this overwhelming army comes at Rehoboam and Jerusalem and Judah because they've turned away from God. And it's just kind of this constant, if you just trust the Lord, he will protect you. He will protect you from people that are your enemy, you know to be enemies. He will protect you from people that you don't know are enemies. But if you don't trust him, things are really going to go badly.
Mhm.
And in Rehoboam's case, they've gone badly twice now. They went badly we studied last week about his taking the advice of these young men, telling the Israelites that he's going to get tougher on them than his father ever was. And he splits the country. So, you would think you would learn your lesson that time, but he hasn't. And as soon as things go well for him again, he's turning to other gods. And it's almost like a reversal of what happened in the Exodus. Okay. God, there's this huge army that Pharaoh has that is keeping them in slavery. Now it's just kind of like they just put it in reverse, and the Egyptians are attacking them and enslaving them all over again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good point. Good. Yeah, and in fact, there's a few commentators I looked at. Shishak and this fort, it invades, attacks Jerusalem, and so God arranged it so that they aren't totally wiped out, because they've been humbled, we assume they've been repentant to some degree. And one point to remember here, and we'll get more into this next week, the one thing, because at this point, Rehoboam is ruling over Judah and Benjamin, the southern kingdom. And Jeroboam is concurrently in charge of all the northern kingdom. But what Rehoboam and the southern kingdom has that the northern kingdom doesn't have is all the priests. And again, we'll get into this next week, because when Jeroboam takes control of the northern kingdom, he sets up some idols, and all the priests in the northern kingdom go down to Jerusalem, and they're in the southern kingdom. So maybe that's the one thing. Maybe that's what's helping Rehoboam and the southern kingdom survive this and be repentant and be humble, is that they have all the legitimate priests of Israel in the southern kingdom, and there aren't any left in the northern kingdom. But that's next week, which is kind of an interesting thought to include in that.
John?
Yeah.
Again, Rehoboam had prophets from God that were helping him, versus Jeroboam, I don't believe, really had
Yeah.
prophets that were
Yeah.
speaking
Right.
truthfully to him.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay. So these shields, hundreds and hundreds of gold shields. Now, I'm no metallurgist or anything, but I've read several accounts that say a gold shield is pretty worthless as an actual shield, because it's too heavy and gold is too soft to actually be a shield. So these are just purely displays of affluence and power and wealth and prestige that Solomon had put into place. So Rehoboam, and there was some thought that actually one of the means by which Shishak was persuaded not to wipe out the kingdom was that Rehoboam came to an agreement that said, just take everything you want, including these shields, but don't wipe us out. That it may have been part of an agreement between them, that was the price Rehoboam had to pay for the kingdom to survive. But regardless, Rehoboam, he's lost these great, this is image, nothing but image, and look how great I am. And he's lost, how long did Solomon reign? 40 years. It took him 40 years to build the temple, his palace, these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shields and all this stuff. And how long has it taken Rehoboam to lose it? 5 years. He's been he's been in charge 5 years, and it's all gone. Liz?
And I was thinking, these are a good metaphor, if you think about it, because you have gold, which is pure, right?
Mhm.
And genuine and usually refined through fire. And the bronze is not. It's from a value standpoint, it's not as pure, right? As far as the metal and the value for it. And
Yeah.
isn't that kind of the thing between Solomon and what his initial path with the Lord versus what you have now?
Yeah.
It's a trading for something cheaper and lesser.
Gold doesn't tarnish, gold doesn't corrode, gold stays gold. You don't have to keep polishing it, and bronze, you have to,
And
it
is bronze
requires some,
pure metal?
it's a compound.
Well, see,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
You mix something in.
I think it's
and
compound.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
And it's not pure.
that's a good point. So, yeah, Lynn?
Well, and that kind of goes along with where I was trying to go before. Sorry, I missed the whole mother thing. But his mother's not Jewish.
Right.
So that's mixed too,
Yeah.
which goes against what God
Yeah.
had called his people to be.
Yeah, and I think that's why the author of Kings
Brings it up twice.
was so adamant about making sure we see that this is, that it's a problem before he was even born. This could
And we
lead to
talked about
problems.
that with Solomon, when dad's attention is split between being king and having that many different wives, the kids aren't getting the attention. They're not being raised by the father. They're being raised by the mother.
Right.
And this woman wasn't a Jew. She didn't know their tradition. She didn't have probably the same respect
Mhm.
for God. And
Yeah.
was it probably monotheistic and all of that.
Right. Yeah. So Rehoboam stuck with these bronze shields. It's a fake thing. He's trying to keep up appearances, which brings to mind Jesus in Matthew chapter 23. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the dish, so that the outside of it may become clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." So it's kind of the same idea. The Pharisees, they're into appearances. Rehoboam's into appearances. He's got to keep up appearances. He's got to look like he's still in charge and still powerful, and he's still got all these wonderful hundreds and hundreds of bright, shiny shields. But it's just fake. It looks good, but it's not really the same. So he's kind of trying to fool everybody, and maybe he's fooling himself as well. In fact, he's fallen so far. There's a point in 1 Kings. The difference between how Solomon had things running and where they are now. 1 Kings is before 2 Kings, right? First Kings chapter 10. Solomon had it to the point where all King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace in the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days. So we've gone from silver being considered worthless to where Rehoboam is trying to keep things up with bronze and these compounds and ersatz things, and just trying to put on a good show. So why do we care? Why do we care? Why are we even talking about Rehoboam? Why are we here? To learn about Rehoboam. Well, what big mistake? Can we summarize his, maybe what Rehoboam did wrong? Can we summarize it in one verse? I think we can, or I wouldn't have asked the question.
That's a good lawyer.
In one verse,
In one sentence.
one verse. Well, it's a sentence. You can.
He relied on his own.
Chapter 12, verse 14. He did evil because he had not set his heart on seeking the Lord. Oh, how about that?
Which one is that one?
Verse 14 in chapter 12. He did evil because he had not set his heart on seeking the Lord. Again.
I'm confused. Which, is this Kings we're still in?
First Kings. No, Chronicles.
I'm sorry. This is second.
I was still in Kings.
It's. I know.
I apologize. I didn't follow. Okay.
Yeah. I probably didn't make it clear.
Go back.
Yeah. I jumped back to Second Chronicles. Sorry, I didn't.
We're in Chronicles, Second Chronicles.
Chapter 12, verse 14 of Second Chronicles.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I did make the jump with them. Thank you.
Yeah, that's my fault. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You know.
I debated whether just to just do one book at a time and not get confused, but I failed.
That's
Oh,
all
well.
right.
You did great.
Slow child.
Nah. Why do we care? James, chapter 1. If I can find James. Where are you, James? There it is. Okay. Chapter 1, verse 5. James says, as a reminder, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. Which sounds kind of like verse 14 in Second Chronicles chapter 12.
Make up your mind.
He did evil because he had not set his heart on seeking the Lord. James is kind of saying the same thing. If you want wisdom, Solomon, at least, again, to Solomon's credit, he asked for wisdom at the start of his reign. James says, ask for wisdom. Rehoboam, as far as we know, did not ask for wisdom. He did occasionally listen to people or let the priest or whoever was working with him during the invasion of Shishak, that they did humble themselves and saved themselves to some degree. But he was not seeking wisdom or said his. Did you have a question?
Oh, I think that's what we see over and over again in a lot of the First Kings, and all this history. We see these bad kings, bad leaders. And it can kind of be discouraging. David, was sort of the standard, and Solomon did some things. We talked a lot about Solomon, but it can be kind of hard to look at these lives and. But what do we learn? And you say, why do we care? What do we learn? And how can we not end up like that? And with all the idol, we talked in the message today about idols and looking at our own lives and where we are. And it's just, that self-examination. And it's just, to really consider it, you can learn, you can definitely learn. It's kind of hard to look at all of these lives, and we'll go, on some other leaders that were kings that were really hard to follow and hard to read about. But still they ask that question, why do we care? What do we learn? What can we do to maybe adjust our lives and really ask wise questions? Are we on track? Are we not on track?
Yeah, right. Good. Thank you. Yeah, Chris?
I see no humility in any of this. There's no humility until you humble yourself. There's no humbleness at all, especially the king, until they lose.
Right.
But, once you've lost, it's hard to gather up, the faith. If you're not humble,
Mhm.
there's no humility in the stories at all. So I think we all have to humble ourselves, put ourselves aside as idols, put everything else aside. In this world, we're leaning on money, people, just like James said, that humble yourself.
Right. Yeah. Mike?
But the one thing that we gotta keep in mind through all of this, it shows God's mercy. Even though, they did wrong, we do wrong, he continues to show us mercy.
That's a great reminder. Thank you for that. Yeah. Mercy,
Undeserved.
grace, mercy. Yeah, that's nice. It's a good thought. Anything else? That's what I've got on Rehoboam. We'll do Jeroboam next week. And compare and contrast. All right, let's have a word of prayer and we'll be on our way. Dear God, thank you for your word. Why do we care? Well, because we can learn things from this. Help us to learn from this, continue to learn from this and everything else we read in your word. What we need to hear and what we need to take to heart and what we need to put into practice. Be with us this week. Keep us all safe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Sure. Part one, part two.
Nancy, it happens a lot. It's amazing. It's amazing, but it's not amazing how often that happens.
You can't get away from it.